Today my guest is Jeremy Likness. Jeremy, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
What do you do?
I do a lot of Silverlight development. So I'm a consultant and a project manager, but a very technical project manager who's been working with Silverlight.
You've worked with Silverlight, and you've also been working with MEF recently, haven't you?
Yes, a lot of managed extensibility framework.
I've been playing a lot with managed extensibility framework as well. Not so much with Silverlight.
Okay.
Tell me about what's that experience like when you're merging MEF and Silverlight?
It's an interesting experience because Silverlight is different than the main .NET runtime. So when you combine MEF with Silverlight, there's a couple caveats and ways that it's different from the main MEF. And the two key things that I always point out with people is, number one, because Silverlight's composed of these ZAP files, which are basically zip files on the web that can be pulled into the application, there's a special catalog with MEF that allows you to dynamically load parts from anywhere on the web and bring them into your application.
Okay.
So you're literally building it up.
Okay, so let's just define that really quickly. A catalog in MEF is what?
It's a container that defines pieces your application needs. So MEF is based on this concept of parts. And parts, you can really think of it as imports and implementations, right? Or contracts and implementations.
Okay.
So I need a dialog service, or I need a tab of functionality. So that's my need, that's my contract.
And my application doesn't explicitly define how I'm going to implement that.
Exactly.
MEF figures out how to implement it.
Absolutely.
And it figures it out from reading these catalogs.
Exactly. So the catalogs tell it where to go look for it.
Okay.
So you can say, look in the existing assembly. Mm-hmm. If you're running MEF on regular .NET, you can scan a directory, for example. Well, in Silverlight, you've got this special type of catalog that says, go look on the web, find a ZAP file, and pull these pieces out of the ZAP file on the fly.
Okay. So is there anything special in Silverlight besides just this reading a ZAP catalog that MEF behaves differently in Silverlight?
Yeah, there's a concept in Silverlight that actually, for example, Visual State Manager started in Silverlight, and now WPF has it, so I'm assuming this may get borrowed, but right now in the Silverlight with MEF is something called a composition initializer. And what this does is with traditional MEF, we talked about catalogs and the way it finds all these parts. Traditional MEF is a lot like other types of inversion of control containers, where you have to create your catalog, and then you create your container, and you basically have to bootstrap everything. So you have this step that says, here's catalog, container, and you're wiring it all together.
Yep, and then you compose it, and it figures it all out.
Exactly. So with Silverlight, we have composition initializer, which is a static initializer that basically allows me to, for example, in my app.cs, which is the overlying application object for Silverlight, it allows me to make a call and say compose imports and pass a class, which would be this, right? So I'd pass app.cs into it, and it will automatically, under the covers, create a catalog for me, scan the current Silverlight runtime, and compose all those parts. So it's a way of simplifying it to where with one line of code, I'm basically bootstrapping my entire application.
Oh, okay, and that works well with Silverlight, which has basically one container that hosts your entire application.
Right. It's typically one container, but the other important thing is a lot of Silverlight is XAML based.
Okay.
And so that XAML's instanced, and so the runtime doesn't necessarily understand if XAML is creating an object that has dependencies. Because I can't control, passing into the constructor. I can't do, the things that I would normally do because I'm not controlling that object being created. It's the XAML runtime. So with this composition initializer, if I have, for example, a view model that I'm creating in XAML, in the constructor of the view model, I can call this initializer and automatically compose things and not have to know about, where's my catalog. Because it gives a global catalog that everything can see.
Okay. So you talked earlier off camera about an advantage that MEF brings to Silverlight when you have parts of your application that maybe users aren't accessing very often.
Right. So, basically the whole thing is we're starting to write huge applications in Silverlight, but at the end of the day, Silverlight's still a runtime within the browser. And so a good example is what we did for the Olympics with this back-end monitoring system that we wrote. So it did things like push configuration files, scanned servers, you could monitor live streaming endpoints, but there's all this functionality And if we had put it into one large application,
It'd be a giant ZAP
it'd be a giant ZAP file, giant download. So not only are you waiting forever to load it, but it's also taking up a ton of memory on your client. So with MEF, what we can do is we can say, okay, here's our shell, and we've got these different parts of the application basically. And when the user says, hey, I want to do a configuration push, we can dynamically pull it in and just on demand compose that application as needed.
Okay, so that advantage is that if they don't use parts of the application, they will never on demand download those
Correct.
files.
Right, so you only give them as much as they need. You give them the ability to navigate out, but you're always only pulling down what they need, so you're streamlining how long it takes the app to load and also how much memory you're consuming on the client.
Okay, great. Let's say I'm a Silverlight developer, which I'm not, by the way, and I want to learn how to use MEF better with Silverlight. Where would I go? What are my resources?
Probably the best resource is going to be a place on Codeplex called MEF Contrib.
Uh-huh.
So it's mefcontrib.codeplex.com, and I'll admit it's a little bit light right now, but we're working on that. And MEF Contrib is basically a community project that its goal is, it's for MEF in general, but we're looking at extending the documentation and examples and quick starts.
Are you running this project?
Part of the project. So Chris Woodruff is part of that project. Yep, and myself, and so I'm focused obviously on the Silverlight pieces. I'm doing a bunch of the quick starts, but we're going to publish sample projects, quick starts, and documentation that says, you know, here's how you get started with MEF, here's how you get started with MEF with Silverlight, here's what's different, and basically pull all those pieces together.
That's great. I know people are kind of talking about MEF, and not a lot of people understand how to use it. And there's a lack of, I don't like to call them best practices, but there's a lack of guidance.
Right, exactly. And so what we've done is there's a lot of blogs that are out there in Twitter feeds. On my blog, I write a ton about MEF.
What's your blog?
My blog is C# image. So it's, C# spelled out or image .jeremylikness.com. It's a mouthful, but you can also go to Winelect and just click on resources Winilog, and there's a link to my blog there as well. So that's probably a little bit easier to get to. But so I cover a lot on MEF, and there's a few other blogs, but that was the whole goal of this MEF Contrib, is saying Mike Talty, I don't know his blog off the top of my head, but for example, he's got some
mtalty.com.
Okay, great. So he's got fantastic MEF videos specific to Silverlight.
Watch those; they're really good.
And so what we said is, let's take all this content, pull it together in one place, and that's what MEF Contrib is all about.
Excellent. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much. I
You're welcome.
Appreciate your time.
I enjoyed it.
Very educational.
CodeStock has been a great experience for me to take MEF as a technology to share with friends.